Yeah, I had a quick question. So I saw you made a post on your YouTube channel the other day about how playing the guitar requires three aspects. It's like a physical thing, a left and a right brain thing. And I've noticed for me, I think the hardest part is I'm not very creative. Do you have any like exercises or tips that might help me like to be more creative on the guitar or maybe to learn that aspect of it?
Yeah, man. So you say that you're not very creative?
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm a very creative person.
Okay. Why?
I don't know. I'm just I think it's something that I struggle with. I've never been good at like if you want to draw a dragon, right? I have an idea of what a dragon looks like. I might not be able to draw a very good dragon, but I have something to start with. Like for guitar, like all you're doing is making sounds. So like I don't know, it's I don't know what like what is the thought process people have when they create things, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think it totally varies from person to person, but like the first thing I would stop doing is labeling yourself as not creative. I really, really dislike labels because whenever you put a label on yourself, you then act in accordance to that label. So if you call yourself not creative, basically you're giving yourself a way out of any time like you are unhappy with something that you try to create. You basically have like that as a scapegoat. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I don't think it's that I'm not creative. I think it's that it's an aspect that it's a skill that I need to improve at.
Yeah, like that's totally the mindset that you want to have. It's an improvable skill, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's a few ways to go about it. I mean, creativity is kind of challenging, but when we think about what creativity is, I mean, the process of creating something, right? So, like, you could create something right now in front of all of us, and you would be training that creativity muscle. Why don't you do that?
You want to play something?
Yeah, like come up with a melody or like a chord progression. Maybe a chord progression that might be easier, but not a chord progression that like don't give me like GDC. Fuck that. Give me like
GD,
yeah.
like something creative. I don't know. I could go like
Can, can we see your hands?
yeah. The lighting's kind of bad, but
All right. Is this something that you've played before, or did you just make this up on the spot?
I mean, I sort of made it up on the spot, but I also kind of remember that from when I was learning like 1, 4, 5, 6 chord progressions.
Okay. So basically, you've got like you
Yeah,
got
pretty much.
A, D, E, F sharp minor. So, what's like let's think about some things that we could do. Like you're basically like this is your strum pattern, right? It's like it's just eighth notes. So this is something that we could fix. Or well, not it's not wrong, but it's something that we could alter to try and
Make it more interesting.
what was that? Sorry.
To make it more interesting.
Sure. So maybe instead of eighth notes the entire time, maybe the first note is going to be a quarter. So it's like dun, 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 dun. Sorry. Right? So now it's a little different, right? Uh,
Yeah.
we could also change up the order of the chords. We could do something like We
Yeah.
could we could change the tempo. Sorry. We could change the key, right? Maybe I can do like 2 run-throughs here, and I can change keys. So maybe I'll do like, let's stick with the. So there's a few variables that we switched up, right? We could also change the chords themselves, right? So that's another one. But like I'm looking at things that we can experiment with, like, because there's so many different options when we're creating something, right? There's an infinite amount of things that you could do. So something that helps me at least is, if we come up with something and then we start changing things, but like we have constraints, right? So basically, in this case, the constraint would be what we started with, like that, like we're basing everything off of that, right? Because if we have nothing that like, if we didn't have that, we would have an unlimited amount of options, right? So by having this simple chord progression, it's giving us something to now experiment with and change, and like there's multiple variables that we could change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And as we just talked about, creativity is an improvable skill, right? And the more variables that you're aware of and you know how to change, the more creative you can be, right? Like, we could change the time signature of that. We could change the mode, right? We could change the voicings of the chords, right? Like, there's tons of different things that we could do, right? But I mean, you got to start somewhere, and we started with that chord progression. We could make the chords more dense. Like, we could play bigger chords, like. Right? So I'm changing up the voicings, or I'm specifically like just making them, like turning them into 7th chords, like throwing the 9 in there if I want. Like, I could go. There's tons of things that we could do. But is this
Okay, that
helpful?
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. How often do you work on your creativity?
I usually don't.
Okay, so do you think if you worked on it, maybe you'd be a little bit better at it?
Yeah, probably, but I don't know. I just feel like sometimes I overwhelm myself a little bit too much. Like, I just think about it more than I should. You know what I mean? Like, I make it more complicated than it is.
How?
I don't know. I just feel like I never had like a nice mindset for it. Like, when I looked at it, I didn't know. The way that I looked at it was I would look at it and I'd be dissatisfied with it, but I didn't think about like what things I could change to make it better.
All right. So do you think now, after this conversation, that now that you've identified some things that you could change to make it better, that would help your creativity?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Well, that's a problem solved, at least to some extent, for now, right?
Yeah, it's a start.
And I mean, you could work on stuff like that, but if that doesn't like satisfy you, then you come back next week and you say, "Hey, Brandon, we still got to fix this, dude."
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, and then we go from there. But I'm not sure if you've ever heard like this. I don't know who said this quote, but it's like, amateurs wait to be inspired, professionals sit down and like get to work. You know what I mean? So like basically, it's like, if you reference this to songwriters, it's like, an amateur songwriter is just gonna wait to feel inspired. It's like, oh, like they're sitting in front of a blank page, can't think of anything, fuck this. I'm just gonna wait till I'm inspired. Okay. Whereas a professional, it's like they sit down and they get to work, and they just do it like every day. And is everything that they produce going to be great? Well, no, but they'll produce more than the guy that's just waiting around to get inspired. And like, it just reminds me of the Beatles, because the Beatles wrote over like 600 tunes, right? I mean, I'm sure they were doing some waiting around to be inspired. I think drugs probably helped with that. I'm not supporting or recommending you do that. But they probably also just fucking wrote a lot, I mean, you have to put out that volume of songs. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was actually watching a video earlier today about ways to be more creative, and one of the tips it said was that just create, because being creative is mostly just creating things, and that's like one of the biggest ways to just be able to like build that skill is just creating things.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing, I think someone typed it in the chat there. Yeah, Lars had mentioned it, is listening to like other people's creations, right? Like listening to other people's songs. Drawing inspiration from that can also help a lot. Yeah.
That was good. Thank you for your answer.
Cool. No worries.
Hey, Brandon, one thing that I realized is like being creative or writing songs, you mentioned the Beatles, they wrote a ton of songs. It takes tons of practice. It's like John and Paul McCartney didn't just like sit down one day and go, oh, I've got all these songs, all these are going to be great. It took like fucking years of them like writing songs and practicing and failing, and then just keep and they just kept on going and writing, and then lo and behold, after years of practice, they wrote the White Album or Sgt. Pepper or whatever Beatles album you love, So it's like anything. It's like playing on stage. It takes fucking tons of practice to be good at it, right? I mean, I don't really play on stage, but I know you have, and I'm sure it's like, you got to put in the work. So
John Paul and Robert Plant, they cranked one out after another, just being bored.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know. It seems like doing something well, no matter what it is, it takes a lot of practice. At least that's my philosophy anyway.
I was just wanted to add that like there is actually a couple. I just read Andrew Huang's book and other things, and there is actually like such a thing as like practicing being creative. And I remember Steve Vai said in a clinic that he usually takes time off his practice time to like have no rules and just fuck around, and he takes his fucking around time extremely seriously.
Wow.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And when you look at some of the things that Steve Vai has put out, it's checks out. Like Candle Power. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but like that was pretty different compared to like everything else, like guitar music. And he put that out recently, which was what made it even more different.
Is that the one where he's playing the Hydra, the 4-string or a four neck Ibanez? It's got a bass neck and some of it's fretless and.
Yeah, no, it's not that one.
Okay.
I know which one you mean, but no, he's just playing a normal guitar.
Gotcha.
For once, right?
Yeah.
But he in that album where he has the Hydra, he has a song called Knapsack, where he had gone through like shoulder surgery or something. And like he told a little bit about the story that he just like couldn't really practice guitar, so he'd just have one on his lap and he'd just like goof around with it, and he wrote that song.
Wow.
And he plays knapsack only with his left hand. It's pretty crazy.
Damn.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
I think about being creative too. Don't be too self-aware and judgmental on yourself either, because if you're creating, especially in music, you're creating something from nothing. So every time you hit a note, you've actually created. So yeah, I find, and I'm a creative. That's what I do every day. I just kind of not judge myself and put it out there. And if it sounds good to you, then it's good. You know, start putting those chords together, putting those notes together, and make them sing the way you want them to sing. But yeah, don't be too self-aware. You know.
Well, I used to think I wasn't creative, but I also think that mostly it was I had a limited vocabulary, and we're all starting off with a limited vocabulary, and you might think you're not creative. It's like I wouldn't be creative with English if I only knew 10 words, right? And if you're starting off with, a guitar and you're playing and like 5 chords, it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not creative, but this course, man, if you stick with it and practice all of it and like scales and everything your teachers say, it starts to flow out of you, and you're like, where did that come from? And it's a lot to do with the vocabulary and practicing the vocabulary, and that's, you can't write anything without words. So practice. And Eddie, my teacher, said, he starts off with, when he's practicing, doing some improv, basically the no rules, fuck around and see what happens. Give yourself 10 minutes of just fucking around, and you'd be really surprised how creative you are. And it just keeps going, it just keeps building the more you play.
Yeah. Asa, you said that so beautifully. If I only spoke 10 words in the English language, I wouldn't be very creative. That is a very eloquent way to put that.
Or with only 10 words, you might be forced to be more creative.
Maybe. Now we're getting into like deep.
That's true.